the ULI BC Women's Leadership Initiative Executive Committee. And on behalf of ULI and all the members of our committee, thank you for joining us. This is our first digital workshop, and it's titled Conscious Conversations in Challenging Times and Beyond. Before I introduce our guest instructor, Deb, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the format for the event. As it is our first event, we'll ask for your patience if we encounter any technical issues, but I think we're all pretty conversant with Zoom by now, so hopefully it goes smoothly. Firstly, we're hosting this event in order to continue offering our high quality, impactful programming to our members and guests to advance their leadership journey. This is part of the mission of WLI and also of Deb, our guest instructor. We will have you all on mute, but just try to keep muted in case you take it off by accident. And we'll use the chat function for questions. So if you have any questions or comments or things you want to share during the conversation, please type them into the chat and we'll be monitoring it. And we will pause to discuss questions and insights during and after the call. We'll also be recording this session to share afterwards, and we'll share a link to that online with everybody who registered. So I'd like to introduce our guest instructor, Deborah, and she is a teacher and trained coach. She's a past award-winning realtor, and her passion and her role now is helping high-performing leaders develop the skills and the mindset to succeed in all areas of their personal and professional lives. I'm really excited to welcome Deb to WLI for her first event, as well as our first digital event. And I really look forward to the dynamic workshop that she has planned for us. I'll have some closing remarks when we're done here, but I'd like to pass it over to Deb now.
Kate, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And I just want to take a moment now, because I might get all excited and forget later, to thank Kate Lambert and Paige Ritchie and Shannon Patterson for making this event happen today, for inviting me to present to you and run this workshop for you, and also for getting everything all set up on the technical end. Thanks, Shannon, for that. Okay, well, let's dive right in. And let me, hang on a second. We have a technical issue already. Here we go. All right, so I'm Deborah Stallingworth. My company is Deborah Stallingworth Coaching. I have two website addresses that will lead you to the same place. You'll notice right off that my name is really long, and though it's on every slide that you will see today, you will not remember how to spell it, because there are people who've known me for 20 years since I've had this name, because I'm only 20 years old, who don't know how to spell it. So you can find me at stellarlifeproject.com or deborahstallingworth.com. All right, about me, Kate has told you a little bit about me, but I want to give you some background so that you have some sense about why you should listen to me and anything that I have to say. So I have a background in education, a BA in Honors English, and an MA in Rhetorical Studies and Shakespeare. I did a joint focus in my master's degree in Rhetorical Studies and Shakespeare, really all the same because it's a focus on language in use. And I'm accredited by the Coaches Training Institute. I've done leadership training with Lawrence & Co., as well as Brene Brown's Dare to Lead program. I was a teacher for 15 years. I taught International Baccalaureate English and Theory of Knowledge, and I ran a successful real estate practice for over 6 years before I realized that I wasn't in my zone of genius and wanted to get back into teaching. And so that's why I'm here today. So my company is called Stellar Life Project Coaching Consulting, and I'm currently also in-house coach and trainer for the RE/MAX Select Group. That's me. And now all of that is just to tell you that at some point I knew something. because credentials are really just proof that you knew something at one time. And I'm hoping that something of what I've known I can pass on to you today, and it'll be useful for you in your leadership journey. To get us started, we're going to just play around a little bit with some of our tools that are available to us on Zoom. So this is a new experience for me to lead a workshop in this environment. I'm used to the more interactive, obviously. I can't even see anybody right now. So help me to see you by finding your annotation device or app on the screen. So if it's under View on your toolbar on the bottom of your screen, under the View section, you'll have an option to annotate. And if you could right now, click on that annotate, and it'll give you an option to, you can click on stamp, and it'll give you an option to stamp something. So you'll notice that I put a star right there on Vancouver-ish. That's probably not really Vancouver. Thank you, somebody already figured it out. Put a stamp on the map where you're at so I can see where you're at. And once you've done that, wow, somebody from way over in the east side of the country, of America. Can I ask that you also just say hi in the chat? Let's try that out, everybody. Make sure, I'm sure you're all proficient with Zoom by now, but I want to see who's here. And the annotation feature, we're going to use it later on. Wow, some people are way down south. And hey, everybody. And if you could just let me know in the chat where you're from. Let us know where you're from and maybe what your title is so we kind of know who's in the room, who's in the Zoom room today. And then let me know, if you're willing to, your answer to these two questions. Are you a ULI member? And are you wearing pants today? And the reason I asked that question is because I put pants on for you today, and pants that are not from a yoga store or an athletic store. So yeah, yeah, real pants. We have development managers. We've got, this is going past me really fast, project managers in the house, research analysts. Yes, we have some other people wearing pants. We've got some members in the house. Oh, somebody's wearing shorts. They must be from Vancouver. C Region, Fraser Basin Council. Yep. Awesome. Yoga pants, shorts and flip-flops. Thanks, guys. Well, I'm glad that everybody's comfortable. Either way, I hope you are. Housing consultant. So we've got a variety of people in the room today, and thanks for everyone for being here. Now that we've tried out those tools, we know how they work. We can see the majority of our people are here from the Lower Mainland. And what's really exciting for us at putting on this workshop for you today is that originally it was scheduled to be an in-person workshop, and I'm really glad that we get to do it this way because it means that you can wear your yoga pants and your shorts, and you can also be here if you're not from the Vancouver area. So welcome, everyone. All right, let's get to it. And I have to turn the annotation off, apparently. There we go, before I can change the slide. There. Oh, and Shannon, I need you to clear the annotations because we're moving into the presentation. So, leading with conscious conversations. And here we go. I'm going to give an outline of the workshop, let you know where we're going today. And we're going to talk about the what and why of conscious conversations. We're going to touch on the 3 phases of crisis, take you into the 4 ingredients for conscious conversation. I'll give you an easy formula for tough conversations that you can use right away. And well, you can use everything I'm going to share today right away. And then we'll go back to the communicating in the 3 phases of crisis. Okay, everyone? All right. So the first thing I want to do is to design our time together. And you all received a workbook in the email that Shannon sent out yesterday. 2 versions of that. There's a printable copy, too late to print it now. And there's also a fillable form That's my first time making a fillable form, so if it doesn't work, forgive me. And you can head on over to your fillable form. You can actually, at the, if you make this screen smaller, you can have them both on the screen at the same time. And you can fill out your notes in the form. So the first thing that I want you to do, and you can do this in a journal as well, you don't have to do it in the workbook. I provided the workbook for you so that you don't have to write down everything I say. You can fill in some blanks and then you can have some reflection just to save your hands, okay? So the first thing I want you to do is to, in your workbook or in your notes, wherever, to set your intention for today's workshop. What is it that you're wanting to get out of today's workshop? What is your intention for the time you're here? So are you looking for new ideas? Are you looking for a refresher? Maybe you already know this stuff. Maybe there's a specific person you need to have a conversation with and you're looking for some tools. Maybe you just want to get some tools for creating a culture of conscious conversation. And maybe your intention is just to be present and listen. Practice some listening skills. We're going to talk about that. So take a moment to write that down. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to ask you, share with you some requests that I have of you. So, and the first request is this, is that you will listen for insight, not agreement. And let me explain what I mean by that. So when you're listening for insight, it's like listening to music, where you let it flow over you, you get present, and you look for your insight. What's here for you that you're going to take away today? I'll also ask that you listen with a beginner's or a growth mindset. And let me just clarify that. I'm sure you know what it is, but a fixed mindset says, I've heard all this before, this is a waste of time. A growth mindset asks, what's here for me? How can I take what I hear and apply it so I can find out if it works for me or not? Okay. And finally, I'd ask that you be willing to play. And what I mean by that is that you'll be willing to put your annotations on the screen, participate in the exercises when I'm asking you to share in the chat. And so right now, let's practice that. If everybody's okay and agrees with my request, can you please put a star on the screen right now, or a heart, or whatever symbol you want. Take a moment to, if you're agreeing with my request, can you put a star on the screen? Popping up, awesome, check marks. Thank you, thank you. Excellent, I'll give you like 10 more seconds to figure out your annotation button. So at least I've got a handful of people who are agreeing to my requests, and I appreciate that. Thank you for playing along with me today. If we were in person, I'd ask you to put your hand up. So thanks for taking the time to do the annotation. All right, let's move on. Shannon, I'll ask you to clear the screen. Thank you. What you just experienced was me designing our relationship, designing the relationship that we're going to have in the next, well, approximately an hour and 15 minutes that we're together. And the designing the relationships is, it's coachy language. It's a language we use in coaching. You may have heard of it before, but it's important because we're always in the process of designing relationships. And if we're not doing so intentionally, we may be defaulting to a design that is at best frustrating and at worst toxic. And so I wanted to I always start all my trainings, all my coaching with the designing the relationship. It's a setting of expectations. And I want to model that for you. And I'll bring it up throughout the presentation. And really, everything that we're going to talk about today, everything I'm going to share with you, is tools for you to be designing your relationships. And if you're not designing them, as I said, you're defaulting them. But not to worry, you can always redesign. And that's what we're going to talk about today, and some of the tools that I'm going to give you for that today. Okay. So let's dive right into conscious conversations. And now, being a student as well as a teacher of language, I want to always start with definitions. And so the definition for conscious conversation, let's start with conscious. It's an adjective. It's describing the type of conversation or communication we want to have. And we are looking at two definitions of conscious, and they're both applicable to our idea of conversations. One is being awake, which is thinking and knowing what's happening around you. You can see why that might be important for conscious communication. And determined and intentional. So if you're in your workbooks, you can fill those things in here, giving you the keywords there. And then conversation, while it might seem obvious, I wanted to take a moment to define that too, because we don't want to make assumptions that what we mean by a word is what everybody means. And this is a part about being conscious with our communication. And so conversation is defined as an informal, usually private talk in which two or more people exchange thoughts, feelings, or ideas, or in which news or information is given or discussed. Now, I share that with you because I don't want you to confuse that with a chat. I make a distinction between a conversation and a chat, as in a chat is social. So when you're inviting somebody into your office to talk about an important matter, to give them some tough information, to perhaps discipline or give tough feedback, inviting them for a chat is setting them up for the wrong expectations, okay? So we distinguish between conversation and chat. Chat is more social, conversation more intentional, okay? And at any time, if you have questions, pop them in the chat, the other chat. So why is this important? It's important because conscious conversations create psychological safety. And it's from this place that inspiration, innovation, and productivity flow. And who couldn't use more of that in the workplace? So I want to take you a moment. We're going to do a quick poll. This is an anonymous poll, by the way. It's so whatever number you choose, nobody else is going to know it's that you picked it. So if you have a team member on this call and you're rating your team as unconscious in the conscious conversation culture zone, they're not going to know. So Shannon, if you could put the poll up right now, and let's just see where people are at in terms of rating your culture on conscious conversation. 1 being unconscious, 10 being fully awake, 5, you're kind of dozing. And when you're in a doze, it's kind of a light sleep. You sort of sometimes wake up and sometimes slip into a deeper sleep. So go ahead and rate that there. I'm going to, I have to use it too. Fun. One thing we didn't do, Shannon, if you could pop in the chat the results, or how are we going to share the results? Because I'm realizing that's the one thing that we did not talk about. Oh, there it is. Voila. Awesome. Okay. So we have a range and a good space. So that's great. So you can see where you're at. I put 10 because I actually communicate mostly with myself. It's probably inaccurate too. As a solopreneur, I'm mostly talking to myself, but yeah, that's really, really helpful to see that. Got a sense where we're at. And so there's always room for improvement and always room for growth. And I want to say I put 10 kind of as a joke because we're never fully awake. There's always space to increase our awareness because we get caught in our own patterns. We get caught in our own stories. And so it's actually, I don't think it's possible to be fully awake. It's always moving towards the waking up, but yeah, we'll look at ways that we can get more awake with our conversation today. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So how do we create a team culture of conscious conversation? The way that we do that, is by modeling it and leading the way. Okay, so I want to acknowledge you for being here today, because you being here to pick up some tools that you can take back into your culture is a great way to help promote a team culture of conscious conversation, okay, by modeling it and leading the way. So I acknowledge you for being here today. Thanks for doing that. Okay. All right. Now, before we get any further into the ingredients for conscious conversation, I wanted to pause and kind of take a detour to the 3 phases of crisis, because one of the things that we talked about, and we want to make this presentation or this workshop useful for you, is put it in the context of the phases of crisis. And for the purpose of our looking at this crisis, we're going to break it down to 3 categories. And this is actually drawn from the curve theory. It was adapted by one of my colleagues at Thinkific. And the 3 phases of crisis, we have chaos, acceptance, and the new normal. And I'm just going to go over some characteristics of those with you so you can understand context of where we're at, you probably know, and what that means for communication, okay? So, chaos. Here's the first phase of our crisis, is the chaos. We all know what that looked like. We've just been in it very recently, and it was a real time to be reactive. And by the way, if you think I missed something on this, it's like, I am not claiming to have everything included here. So if you missed something, go ahead and throw that in the chat if you think there's an idea you want to add. So the self characteristics when we're in this chaos phase: confusion, the world's been turned upside down, it's hard to see beyond personal safety and well-being. Adrenaline kicks in and we get this temporary energy was unleashed. We saw in our teams that people would do explicit actions, but they wouldn't step outside of boundaries, okay? Guilt was coming up in that phase of like, am I doing enough? Who can I compare myself to? It's really hard to know if you're doing enough when you're at home working behind a computer like this, where, you know, I can't see any of you, so I don't know what you're up to. So we saw that managers were tending to be over controlling in this phase, which was adding stress both to the managers and to the direct reports. And the priorities in this phase were, again, physical safety, emotional safety, and financial safety. Okay, knowing that is important, and we've just been through it, and it was like, if you recall, this electric undercurrent of stress caused by the uncertainty of what was happening, what was coming, and you know, knowing that shapes the communication and the way we did it. I think a lot of people did really well with that, and we've watched some organizations do better than others. Great example of an organization that did really well communicating to both inside their organization and to the public was actually Galen Weston from the Superstore and Shoppers Drug Mart. So his communications were extraordinary and inspiring. So great to pull examples from there. So our next phase was acceptance. And so in the acceptance phase, we found new ways of doing things. So the photo on the right is taken from the internet. This 92-year-old man was dyeing his wife's hair because she can't get it done anymore. We're finding new ways of doing things. The photo on the left is actually a photo that was shared in my family chat of my niece cutting my nephew's hair. So, you know, we've gone from toilet paper memes to haircut memes. And we're in this new phase of acceptance where we're finding new ways of doing things. And so this acceptance phase, which we're still in, by the way, is a time to be proactive. I've talked to several people in the last week or so. It was like in the last few weeks after it lasted 2 weeks, we're like, frustration was the characteristics. And we're in the long haul rather than a couple of weeks. People are trying to figure out how to endure or to thrive. There's lots of talk about what we want to accomplish coming through this. We've seen the energy crash as that initial adrenaline is gone, and we're seeing some more guilt come in. Depression is setting in for some people, and as leaders, it's really important to be aware of that as you're communicating, that your people who are sitting at home who might be putting on a happy face on Zoom and everything seems okay, they might be experiencing guilt and depression. And you want to just be sensitive to that. Some of the key team characteristics that you may be observing is that productivity has evaporated as people are seeking some sort of balance. We found in the first weeks, the first phase of the crisis, as we all started working from home, that there was two focuses: the virus and work. And people were putting extended hours into work as we're all figuring out how to do everything via Zoom and video conference and working remotely. What you're probably seeing is a contrast between the fabulous and the non-fabulous people. And there may be some frustration for you as leaders with the limited amount of oversight you're able to do and finding new ways of doing things. So you want to be careful that your frustration is not coming out on your team. So our priorities in this phase: routines. Now, people are either seeking routines or being encouraged to have routines. And so that's my recommendation to everybody, is to be focusing on setting some new routines. There's an opportunity here to, if we can adapt quickly. So we can settle back into our way of being. And people have started to call this the new normal. And I'm going to say, from the purpose of how I'm coming at it, I don't think we're in the new normal yet, or at least not entirely. We've got one foot in each camp of acceptance versus new normal, because new normal isn't going to happen until we're out of isolation, as far as I'm concerned. And so that's the point that I'm coming at. So routines are important for you to keep in mind, leaders, that you're wanting to encourage routines, personal routines as well as professional routines, to support your people. And then the new normal. We don't know what it is yet. We don't know what it's going to be. And it's going to be a time to be innovative. That much we know. And some of that's already starting to happen. In some of the industries that I work with and some of the people I'm working with, they're saying, wow, we're doing it this new way that we never thought of before, and we're going to take that forward. There was so one woman that I was coaching, I was speaking with last week, and she's a partner in an investment firm. And she's like, I've just discovered that I can work from home at least one day a week and I get more done. And so I'm going to do that. So we're finding ways to do our work differently already. So that's why I say we have a 1 foot in acceptance and 1 foot in the new normal. But when we actually move back into the new normal, whenever that might be, some things to be aware of as leaders in terms of when you're communicating. There's going to be some of your people who are struggling to get back to the routines and I think back to the routines, they're not going to be the same. It's going to suddenly feel really busy for you and for your team members and your employees and staff. And so it's going to bring a different kind of stress. And it's really important to be alert to that as we're communicating. And then some possible team characteristics. If you've had to lay anyone off from your team, you might find that your team is depleted and they're going to feel under-resourced if they have less people. We might see some new organization of teams, some consolidations and new teams created. And we might see there's some new staff, some lost staff. There might be a sense that loyalty to employees drops. So we've seen a lot of companies step up saying, we're going to take care of people, we're going to take care of people. And there might be some fear that comes out of when we get into the new normal, not back to the new normal, into the new normal, there might be some anxiety from your employees that your loyalty to them is going to drop and their concern is going to be for the bottom line for the company. So just being alert to that when we're communicating is super important. And this is something to communicate to your team members, is like, this is the time to be innovative. This is the time to show yourself to be valuable to the company in new ways. Okay. So I'm going to circle back to these phases of the crisis at the end of this workshop, when we take everything that we've learned and kind of put it in that context of the how to communicate in those 3 phases of the crisis. And by the way, this is not linear. You can get bounced back and forth in any of these phases of crisis. Sometimes if somebody in your family contracts the virus and gets ill, that can bump you right back into the chaos phase, okay? So keeping in mind that it's not linear. And again, priorities for the new normal phase, there's opportunities here for growth and change in your company and in your communications. All right. So this is a moment I want to pause and give you a moment. If you would share with me any insights you've had so far, just pop those in the chat. And while you do that, oops, I'm going to get into the 4 ingredients of conscious conversations. I'm just going to pull up the chat because I want to make sure there was no questions about anything there. Okay. All right. Conscious conversation ingredient number 1. You've probably heard this before. What's the most important ingredient to having a good conversation? It is listening. Okay. So, yeah. Yes. Thanks, Kate. Use conversation versus chat. Terminology is definitely key. So, whoops, go on back. Let's go back. So conscious conversation, our first ingredient that's really important for conscious conversation is that we have true listening. And I didn't put just listening, I put true listening intentionally. I'm always very intentional about the language I use. Not that I get it right all the time, I'm human too, but it's so important to be really conscious of the language we're using and really intentional and deliberate about the language we're using. So quick quiz, because I know you've heard that before, that listening is the most important part of any good communication. So Shannon, this is time for the poll. I want to see how many levels of listening are there? And Shannon, once you've got the, we'll just wait for Shannon to get the results for us. Right. Okay. So, well, here's the thing is the majority of people said there were 3 levels of listening. And I want to start by saying, first of all, you are all correct. It depends on where you look, how many levels of listening there are. But I like to work with the 3 levels of listening, because it's easier for us to hold less things in our mind than to hold many. If you walk around going, oh, am I listening at level 1 or level 5 right now? And it's a little bit harder to do. So we're going to work with the idea of there's 3 levels of listening, because if I gave you 6, you will not remember this afternoon what all 6 of them are. Whereas if I give you 3, I know you're going to remember, and that's the important thing. And over 50% of you already know that, so that's fantastic. Let's see if you can see what they are. So we've got 3 levels of listening: internal listening, focus listening, and global listening. Okay. And can you share, okay, so question here, can you share someone asked me, can I share any insight on language tips to help avoid planting seeds of negativity around the unknown? Example, some staff might be nervous about uncertainty that comes with statements such as new normal. Absolutely. And give me a moment, I'm going to come to that. So thank you for that question, and we will come back to that question. So hold that. So 3 levels of listening: internal listening, focus listening, and global listening. Characteristics of level 1 listening. Internal listening is listening to your own voice. It's that ignoring listening. It's what you do when you're in class. And I hope you're not doing level 1 listening right now, pretending to listen or selective listening. Level 2 listening is the kind we want. We want level 2 and level 3. Those are our goals. So focus listening, listening with curiosity, reflecting what you hear. And the best way to know that you're in level 2 listening is by simply asking questions, okay? And I want to make sure you know this, like, being a good listener is not about being a good person, okay? Some people seem to be better listeners. It's a skill that you can develop. And I wanted to make sure I left you with that today, that the skill of level 2 and level 3 listening can be developed by simply asking questions, coming from a place of curiosity. And it's hard. It's a hard thing to do because we get caught up in our own story of the event or the experience. And so sometimes we forget to ask questions because we're too busy processing our own version of what's happening. So level 3 listening listening to others in the context of their entire surroundings. So being aware, and the question that came through a moment ago was like, how can we be sensitive to language, and is an indication that that person who asked the question is listening at a level 3, that global listening, understanding the context of the entire surrounding. Now we're in an interesting situation right now because probably for the first time in our lives, first time ever, we are all experiencing the same event. The whole world is experiencing this event. Now, it's not to say we're experiencing it the same way, because we're going to be in different phases of the crisis, chaos, acceptance, new normal at different times, depending on how much media we're consuming, what's going on with our family and friends and people close to us. There's going to be a lot of different factors, but essentially we're all having the same experience. So it's going to be so much easier to practice and experience that global listening of understanding context of the entire surroundings of the other person than ever before. So now's a good time to kind of be alert to that so you can bring it with you into what we're going to call the new normal, right? So it's empathetic listening. It's deep listening with a suspension of judgment, a suspension of all assumption, and a willingness to receive new information, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Okay. So I have a listening challenge for you. And normally I would do this listening activity if we were all in the same room. It'd be a lot easier to do this, where we would practice the listening at the level 2 and level 3. But since we can't do that, I'm going to ask you to commit to a challenge. And here it is. I want you to commit to practicing level 2 and level 3 listening today after the workshop. And if you agree, think of a person you will practice with. Maybe it's your boss, maybe it's your kid, maybe it's your spouse. And once you have that person in mind, can you pop a star on the screen for me? Thank you. This is so important that we do this, because even I listen to people for a living. Okay, so I know I'm talking a lot today, but I'm a coach. And so I spend a lot of my time listening to people and making sure I'm in level 2, level 3 listening and really holding that space. And yet we can all default to level 1 listening. I caught myself doing it just the other day when my husband was telling me something and I was like, off thinking about something else. We tend to do it most with those people closest to us. So that's a challenge for you maybe, is to practice with somebody who's quite close to you, because we tend to fall into level 1, pretending to listen. And it's not to make us bad people. We're just like, that's how our brains are working. It's not efficient to be listening at level 2 and level 3 all the time. It's taking a lot of effort from us to be listening at that level. Okay. All right. So that's fantastic. I just want to acknowledge all of you for your willingness to commit to that and practicing that. Right, so let's get to ingredient number 2, values-based communication. So in the values-based communication is important because, well, first of all, let's talk about what values are, okay? They're the principles or standards of behavior, one's judgment of what's important in life. And Brene Brown describes it this way: a value is a way of being or believing that we hold most important. Now, this is going to be really important for you and the people you're dealing with, because our values, here's the value of values-based communication. Sorry, I couldn't help myself from the puns. So we're reminded that there is no right or wrong. There are only different opinions and experiences. This means you aren't trying to convince anyone or win the conversation. And when we come from values-based communication, where we're understanding our values and we're understanding the values of the other person, we're going to be coming from a place of curiosity and acceptance of other people's views. And this is so, so vital. And so we're going to do an exercise today with values, and I sent you a worksheet on that. So there's 3 steps for values-based communication. Step 1 is to know your values. Step 2 is to know your organization's values and make sure your team knows them too. And step 3 is to invest the time to know the core values of each member of your team. And I know you're probably going, oh, that sounds like a lot of work. It's not. We're going to spend a little bit of time right now with yours and doing an exercise that's going to help you with knowing your values. And you can take this exercise back to your team. So, ready to play? This is the part you agreed to before that you're willing to play. In the email that you were sent, Shannon sent it out to you yesterday, I gave you a values checklist. Shannon, could you share it, just clear the annotations off the screen? Thank you. So I gave you a list of values in the handouts that I gave you yesterday in the email as part of the worksheet. And if you are the type of student who likes to do pre-work, you will have already done this. If not, I'm going to give you a little bit of time right now to go through and I'm sure most of you, because you've been in business, you've experienced other leadership training and workshops, you've gone through this values exercise. I just ask you to play with me because I think you're going to find that this one's a little bit different than anything you've experienced before. So just take a few minutes to circle the values that you hold important to you. Now, I had one fellow I did this with recently, and he circled every single thing. Oh, so someone pointed out empathy didn't make the list. I will add empathy next time around. And that's why I'm asking if anything not on here that you think should be here. I mean, this list is like, it's organic, it's growing, right? This is the thing with language. You can't get them all. So, wow, cool. Somebody's circling on the screen and we can actually see that you're doing that. So that's pretty cool. But you may not necessarily want to do that, or you can, go ahead, because we don't know who you are. So go ahead and circle or mark them for yourself and identify what those values are. Again, I've had some people circle everything. It doesn't make you a bad person if you don't choose some things. Okay, we're just talking about the ones that are they guide you, they drive you in your day-to-day actions and in your decisions and even in your communications. And generally, you might have 10 to 12. I know have you guys ever had that people said, oh, pick your 7 values. I'm not a fan of saying you have to have a certain number like that. And that being said, I'm going to trick you in a second. Okay. It's going to give you another few seconds to do that. And even if you haven't quite finished, the next phase of this, you'll still be able to do it. Okay. Another 10 seconds and then we're going to move on. All right. We're going to keep playing with this and we're going to go to the next part of this exercise. And so take those key values that you identified and we're going to actually boil them down. And I know I said I wasn't a fan of saying you have to have 7 values or 5 values. What I am a fan of is you identifying your top 2. So for the same reason as I said with the listening, you can break those all down to multiple levels, but most people can't hold more than 2 or 3 ideas at one time. And so for me to walk around going, I have 10 values, and to walk around making sure I'm living those all the time, and that I'm communicating to someone else's 10 values is really complicated. Whereas if we narrow them down to our top 2, We can boil them down. So that's what I want you to do right now. I want you to identify your top 2 values. And I want you to write them in the chat with a brief description of how each value shows up in your behavior. And you'll notice, don't feel bad if you're saying that family isn't one of your values and you don't choose it as one of your top 2, because chances are it falls underneath one of those top 2. I like to look at the top 2 values as our umbrella values. I'll give you an example. So my top 2 values, my top core values, are learning and connection. And the examples of ways that that shows up in my life is, for learning, I'm always reading and taking courses. For connection, I spend time nurturing relationships in all areas of my life. Work, friends, business, I said that already, family. So family is a strong core value of mine, but it's not my main one. Connection's more important, and it falls under connection, okay? So take a moment, once you've got your top 2, I'm gonna open up the chat. Here's where I really need you to play with me, guys. You promised you would play. So give me your top 2 values in the chat. And if you can think of an example of how that shows up in behavior, add that as well. Awesome. So Joseph shared that empathy is one of his top values. He tries to put himself in the shoes of others, if they have shoes. And follow-up, obsessed with never giving up. Okay. Chasing and ensuring nothing gets lost. Amazing. See, Joseph just added 3 and 4. It's really tempting to do that. And it's okay to come to play with this for a while. I mean, we're obviously doing it in a kind of time constraint, and you might want to sit with it for a bit and go, oh, actually, right? And you don't have to give up fun and optimism, Joseph, to say that empathy and follow-up are your key values, because empathy, the others may fall under that, okay? So from Darren, in Oregon, we've got inclusion. He tries to learn about other circumstances and giving back. Okay. Yeah, nice. Don't overthink it. So from Kate, understanding, always looking to learn more about her world. Awesome. Harmony. From Anna, keeping things balanced, commitment, sticking through to the end. Family, Janine says family and financial stability. Connections and accountability are from Yvonne. Courage, so being vulnerable, living with my whole heart. Teresa has met Brene Brown too. Awesome, okay. Wholehearted living. Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna let you to continue to pop them in there. And as you'll see, we have as many different takes on values as the people who put them in there, and everybody comes at things with slightly different point of view. So you can see if risk-taking is one of my top 2 values. I'm a risk-taking, so say my top 2 are creativity and Patty says creativity, yeah, courage to be vulnerable, creativity, encouraging solutions that come unexpected or unconventional way. And then some people are communicating with me privately, and I don't know if you know you're doing that, so if it's okay to switch over, you can do a drop down and switch to the public, okay? Creativity. So if creativity and risk-taking are my top 2 values, and I come up with in a conversation with somebody whose top 2 values are financial security and stability, and we're trying to grow something or work on a project together in a company, whether they're a client or a team member, you can see how that would cause conflict, right? We've got, shows up oil and water, right? Financial stability, risk taker, and you put those two together. But knowing that, and if you know that about the other person, you won't take it so personally, because that person, maybe he's the CFO or she's the CFO, and they're always concerned about cutting corners with the costs and cutting costs, and you're going to like be creative and they keep shutting you down. And you might take that personally and think, well, this is about, they don't believe in me and they don't like my ideas, when really they're just trying to come from their own place of values. And so knowing that about your team members and taking this exercise back and doing with them and talking amongst the team about what that looks like and what that means to them, it's so helpful. So that when there is a conflict, you can say, oh, this is why I'm annoyed with that person. They're stepping on my values. And if we know that, then we can go to them and say, then we can get to the tough conversation part and actually talk about it. Okay? Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for playing, guys. And I hope you'll take this back and do it with your team. Your top values may also change slightly right now. I'm not sure that they will. They may manifest in different behaviors, but our values don't usually change. Our values are kind of fixed. What's important to us in terms of where our focus is and how we behave around them are the same. It may change, but our values are going to be the same. So for me, connection is a top value, and I am, I ramped up my need for connection right now. So for someone who financial stability is a top value, they may have been experiencing even more stress right now because that is their core value. Does that make sense? Okay. So yeah, keep in mind that the behavior might change around it, but the value usually is the same. And even something like, a top value of connection, it might manifest in somebody else's behavior, might actually result in me behaving differently from that value, but it's still a value. Hope that makes sense. Okay. All right. So I'm not sure why this slide is here again, so we're going to just slip right past it. So key insights so far from this exercise. And I coach and teach around insights. So I want to make sure you have insights, because insights change the way we see the world. And so I want you to take a moment to just tune in. What is your insight around doing that exercise for yourself, or taking about your team and what it might mean? And while you're doing that, I want to go back and answer that question that was asked in the first place. Patty asked, can I share any insight on language tips to help avoid planting seeds of negativity around the unknown? For example, some staff might be nervous about uncertainty that comes with statements such as new normal. Again, it comes down to just having honest conversations, right? And being transparent. So having the tough conversations and being courageous. So we're going to get into the next element of conscious conversation. I think coming up next is courage. And so that gets us there is that being courageous and speaking the truth and just saying, look, I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm in this with you. So letting them know that you're in it with them, and that when you have any information to share about what the new normal is going to look like, that you will share it. You're not going to withhold information from them. And no matter what it looks like, you're there with them, and you're going to walk through this with them. Okay. And that might mean supporting them in a transition. If it means your company's downsizing, that might mean supporting them in that transition, because there are ways that we can have those conversations and support people when they're exiting our organizations that will reduce the impact of it. But again, just like being honest and being there with them is, I think, the best way I could answer that. Okay. All right. So ingredient number 3, courage. I gave you a spoiler alert on that one. Why courage? Well, let's begin with what it is. It's the ability to control your fear in dangerous or difficult situations. It's a willingness to show up and be seen, even when we can't control the outcome. And this goes back to what I said a moment ago in response to that question, is being willing to show up and be seen, even when you can't control the outcome. You don't know what the outcome's going to be. None of us do, of this crisis and what it's going to look like in our organizations when we return to offices, if we return to offices. Okay. And so the willingness to show up and be seen and just say, none of us can control the outcome, and just being honest about that. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, I'm trained by the Dare to Lead program, and the research question that Brene Brown asked when she was doing her Dare to Lead research, her leadership research, was this: what, if anything, about the way people are leading today needs to change in order for leaders to be successful in a complex, rapidly changing environment where we're faced with seemingly intractable challenges and an insatiable demand for innovation? This was actually written several years ago, but it's so relevant to the moment in time we find ourselves in. And the answer, the predominant answer from leaders was, we need to braver leaders and more courageous cultures. Now, the number one reason we avoid tough conversations, it's fear. So what are we afraid of? Being impolite, fear of not seeming nice, fear of rejection, even fear of death. I know I just caught your attention. For those of you who are in level 1 listening or now listening, even fear of death. And hear me out. You've all heard the statistics of public speaking and how people fear public speaking more than death. And the reason for that is that we historically, the primal part of our brain, if we were to speak out, we might get kicked out of our tribe. And if we get kicked out of our tribe, then we die. Our brain is an interesting thing, because our brain's job is to keep us safe and alive. And if the way we've been doing things is keeping us safe and alive, our brain doesn't want to do anything differently. Okay. So this is when we have these tough conversations, we confront people and we invite them to an intense conversation, even when we're the ones who are leaders and we're in control and we're on the, in the higher chair on that side of the desk. We can still have, sweaty palms and pits and racing heart, because there's potential for conflict. And now some of you may know what I'm talking about. Some of you may go, well, what is she talking about? But it happens for some people, and it's good for you to know that it might be happening to the person you're speaking to, that they're having fear of speaking up as well. Okay, and so we want to be alert to that. So to overcome our fear, what we do is we engineer safety by being nice and polite and avoiding tough conversations, including giving productive, honest feedback. So our rule of thumb, and this is from Brene Brown, is that clear is kind, unclear is unkind. I'm going to go back to, I think it was Patty, you asked that question. How do you avoid planting seeds of negativity? Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So always being clear and transparent is the best way to do that. And just letting them know you're in it with them. So self-assessment. I'm not going to ask you to do this one publicly. You'll notice on that page of your workbook, there's a place for you to answer that question. Where would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of your comfort with sharing honest feedback? So I have a question that so I believe courage is a skill which can be developed and improved and not an attribute or a character trait. Yeah, the answer is yes. I do believe it's something that you can work on. And you can work on it by deconstructing the stories. So courage traditionally is seen as an attribute or a character trait that you either have it or you don't have it. And so as a result, there's a lot of people going, well, I'm just not courageous, so I'm not going to do anything, right? Or I'm just not courageous, so I'm not going to have that conversation. And the way we gain courage, I believe, is by actually having the tough conversations to put ourselves in the uncomfortable situations. So those people who have high levels of courage, according to the research of Dr. Brown, is that they believe that it was a trait that they just had, and they look for people who already have these character traits, and they tend to be a certain type of person. So if you've had a background in, sports and trying out for things, and your parents encouraged you to try new things and have a growth mindset of like, it didn't matter if it didn't work out, that failure was okay, and you came from that perspective, you will have strengthened your character muscle, your courage muscle. Whereas if you sorry, I got distracted by the chat. That's the problem with this format, right? So the thing is, if you strengthen your courage muscle by having these experiences, that's why I say it's a skill. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Another question was, did I answer the questions about the most essential ingredients for conscious conversations? Yep, I'm getting there. So we've got, we're working through them. We're getting there. So the most essential ingredient for conscious conversations is courage. Okay, without that, none of the rest of this matters, because you can't apply it unless you've got the courage to do so. So rating yourself, how good are you at giving difficult information or sharing honest feedback? And rate yourself from a 1 to 10, and it's okay. This is just like where you are right now. It doesn't mean you're stuck there. You can get better. Sometimes you're better than others. Maybe you're better at doing it with certain people than other people. And looking at like what's going on there, because there's all these different factors that we have that shape how we interact with people, right? You might have a difficult time giving feedback to somebody who you're their senior on the team, and yet you have a hard time giving them feedback. And it could be they remind you of your stepfather who scares you, right? Like, you don't know, there's all these different pieces. So don't judge yourself, just give an assessment of where you're at and where you want to be. Okay. So for sake of time, I'm going to ask you to do this as homework later, but I'm also just going to give you a moment to think about it and reflect on this. What is one way you might be engineering safety in your workplace? Are you a team leader who's avoiding a conversation with a team member who maybe is bringing negativity and toxicity to team meetings? That could be one way, right? I've been in organizations where there's somebody who's like, was clearly incompetent and really needed to be let go, and the leader was too afraid to have that conversation, and so it kind of poisoned the rest of the culture. So there's those things that could be happening. So what's one way that you might be engineering safety in your workplace? Maybe it's avoiding a conversation, it's avoiding a person. And is there someone you could be more kind to by being more clear? I really encourage you to take some time after this workshop today to reflect on that. If we were together, I would give you the time now, but I want to make sure that we wrap up in the time that we said we would. So any insights so far that you have that you want to share? We've covered courage, the essential ingredients of listening, values-based communication, and courage. Those are our 3 ingredients so far. We've got 1 more to go. Okay. And keep popping questions in the chat if you want. Awesome. So conscious conversations, ingredient number 4, trust. And we're going to break this down. So in your workbook, I gave you a chart that looks like this. And you can go ahead and fill in the column on the left-hand side. Each box gets its word. And we're going to do an exercise with this. I just thought it would be better than having you write the words out twice. So you can go ahead and start filling those in with the 7 elements of trust. This is key for designing and redesigning relationships, like I talked about in the beginning. So the first one in your first box is boundaries. And Brene Brown describes boundaries as what's okay and what's not okay. Best definition for boundaries I've ever heard. And some people say, oh, I'm not very good at setting boundaries. I'm like, all you have to do is ask yourself, what's okay and what's not okay? So in an organization, what's not okay is that you come in late, right? And so if you don't let a new team member, when they come onto the team, know what's okay and what's not okay, how are they supposed to know? So we do this all the time. We're always designing relationships. Again, we're doing it either intentionally or unintentionally, but we're doing it. Some of the ways we do it unintentionally is like by not speaking about what we expect. So reliability is our next one. You do what you say you'll do. Accountability. You own your mistakes, apologize, and make amends. Often people confuse accountability and reliability. Say, oh, who's accountable for this task? It's really like, and again, it's semantics, but for the sake of this, we're going to separate those ideas. The reliability is knowing that that person's going to actually do that thing, okay? And accountability, own your mistakes, apologize, make amends. The next one, the vault. You don't share information and experiences that are not yours to share. This is so, so key to establishing trust in a relationship and on a team. Choosing, and when somebody else does it, actually making sure that you tell them, we don't do that here. Integrity, choosing courage over comfort, which is exactly what I was just talking about. It's like telling someone else that actually we don't do that, or we talk about someone else. You got a problem with that person, go talk to them. Okay. So choosing courage over comfort and practicing your values, coming from a place of honest intentions. Non-judgment, we ask for what we need and talk about how we feel without judgment. And generosity, extending the most generous interpretation to intentions, words, and actions of others. I'm sorry, I keep tapping my microphone. Generosity is so key here, to come from that place of being truly curious that we may not have all the information. So we tend to, because we're human, react and blame other people. When something goes wrong, we're seeing it happening out in the world right now. People are upset about what's going on with the crisis, and they're blaming politicians, and they're blaming people, and they're coming up with conspiracy theories. And it's actually just eroding culture on the bigger scale, right? So if coming from a place of the most generous interpretation of intentions, words, and actions of others will help to establish and build trust. Okay, so there's two categories you've noticed when you look at these. One is setting clear expectations in the categories of trust, and the other is creating psychological safety. So for setting clear expectations, it's boundaries, reliability, accountability. So making sure your team knows what expectations look like. We want to make sure we touch on all three of these points of the elements of trust. Now, in communicating and clarifying expectations, there's one amazing question. It's the best question ever for communicating expectations. And this is from Brene Brown too. What does done look like? It can be a question you give your team to ask you, and a question you ask your team when you give them instructions and they're like, yep, sure, got it, I'll do that by Friday. And you're like, okay, what does done look like? Making sure that you're all on the same page. Amazing. All right, so trust is the other part, is creating psychological safety is the other four: the vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. We're gonna do an exercise now with this, and I want you to play along with me. We're almost done. I want you to think of a colleague. Maybe you think of your spouse, I don't know, but we're work focused on this today. So think of a colleague with whom you would like to have a better communication. Got somebody? Choose one of the elements of trust and write 2 examples of behaviors that you could work on and behaviors you want to see from them. And if you already have a strong trust with a particular element, indicate the behaviors that contribute to that strength. Now, obviously, if we were sitting together in a room, we take the time to do this. I'm going to trust that you're going to do this on your own. You can also take this back and do this with your team so that you have a common shared language for what these behaviors look like. So once you have that, and you've chosen which element of trust you're going to use, I'm going to work with boundaries because it's at the top. So if you want to work with another one, that's fine. But I'm going to recommend we work with boundaries so they're all kind of doing the same. What I'd like you to do is take a moment to write down, you can choose one of these columns, either, I'd like you to start with yourself because I think it's so important that we start with ourselves. What does it look like for you when you're keeping boundaries, right? When you're increasing trust with a colleague in terms of keeping boundaries. So for me, when I talk about boundaries, is stating expectations clearly and taking the time to design the relationship. Those are behaviors for me that are key for making sure boundaries. So I'm looking at a colleague and I'm asking them the behaviors that I want to see more of from them. I might say, I want to know that you will show up to work on time because it's not okay when you come in late. I'm just using that example because it came to mind, okay? And another example of a boundary would be to let's talk about the, certain things you don't want to talk about with them, right? Boundaries. It's overstepping a boundary of yours. It's not okay to make off-color jokes. So maybe that's a boundary for you. And that's a behavior you want to address with this colleague, going, you know what, you might think those are funny. It's not funny to me, right? And then for each of the elements where you could improve and each of the places where a colleague of yours that you're thinking of might improve. And then already, what are those behaviors that you might have? So if you can help me out by just giving me some examples of what that would look like for you in terms of behaviors. So pick one of them and any one of the 7 elements and share in the chat 1 or 2 behaviors of what that would look like in action. Do you have a shy bunch here today? And do I have to put my teacher glasses on? So this is what my daughter calls my mean teacher look. I'm just kidding. So boundaries. Keep hours for replying for emails. Awesome. Thanks, Kate. Guys, I know this isn't easy, but it's important. If we don't take the time to articulate what the behaviors look like for each of these things, then how can we communicate them effectively that those are our expectations? And it might be something you want to hash out with your teams, right? Obviously in the vault, it's pretty obvious is that we don't talk about things that are not ours to talk about. And it could be that something you want to work on. It could be something you want a team member to work on or a colleague. Okay, well, I'm going to move on. Feel free to share any insights you had so far. I want to move on and make sure I give you the formula for tough conversations. So remember, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Avoiding tough conversations in the name of being nice or polite is unkind. So our results, the result of avoiding tough conversations is that it diminishes trust and engagement. It increases problematic behavior. It decreases performance due to lack of clarity and shared purpose. And then here's the formula. Got this. I believe I gave this to you in your worksheet. So number one, plan what you're going to say. So it's so important to take the time to script this when you're, even if you're good at having tough conversations, it's still valuable for you to script it because you never really know what's coming out of your mouth until it comes out. None of us can predict the future. So if we don't plan it, random stuff can come out. Wow. So plan what you're going to say, schedule the conversation, and ask permission. Now, those two are important. Scheduling the conversation and asking permission are important because we don't want to blindside somebody with a conversation where they're about to hear something that might be difficult to hear without letting them know it's about to happen. So we want to make sure that both parties are aware that a conscious conversation is about to occur. Okay. Number 4, we're going to state the facts in 20 seconds or less. Okay. Taking time to make sure you're clear on the facts. This is why I wanted you to write it out in the first place, because if you don't write it out, you're going to be rambling. So take the time to make sure you're clear on the facts and you're leaving assumptions and judgments outside of the conversation. It's vital to how well the conversation is going to go. And when we bring blame and judgment to a conversation, we also invite defensiveness, and nothing's going to turn a conversation or a relationship toxic faster. So once you've stated the facts, you're going to state your feelings, and you're going to state your feelings from a calm, clear-headed place. Again, refer to number 1, plan what you're going to say. It's so much easier to keep it short and concise if you plan it. And the example would be, I felt very uncomfortable when you did that. It was like we were suddenly rivals instead of on the same team. Oh, and this is referring to another worksheet I have where the person is talking to someone else because they actually did something in a board meeting that wasn't expected. So the player 1 in the board meeting presented information that the 2 had agreed they weren't going to present yet. So after you've stated your feelings, you're going to suggest a resolution or make a request. I'm always a fan of making a request over suggesting a resolution, depending on who you're dealing with, because some people might feel like you're telling them what to do. So making a request sometimes works better. Again, you'll have to make a judgment depending on what the relationship is there. So suggesting a resolution, you need to be abundantly clear what will resolve the situation. Reminder, clear is kind. And for example, I wanted to share this with you so that you'd understand my perspective. My request is that we agree to not speak about something in a board meeting. We stick to it. If you disagree with me, let's talk it through beforehand so we can go into the meeting and united. What are your thoughts? Okay. So there's your formula for the tough conversation. Stick to the plan and remember that clear is kind. Notice they started with that, the beginning and end. Okay. So I want to bring that all back. And before I move on, if there's any questions or insights you want to go ahead and throw those in the chat, that's great. Kate will let me know. So bringing it all back to the current crisis and any crisis that you might find yourself in, because regardless, like we happen to be in this one, but the phases of crisis are the same regardless of the crisis. It could be something that happens in your company after this is all over, okay? We can get kicked back into the chaos phase. It's quite possible. So for communication in the chaos phase, we're going to focus on high empathy, reducing fear, health and family first. And I'm sure all of you did that. There was a lot of information. There was a lot of support out there. And it comes naturally to us. It's so interesting how some of the best of humanity has showed up through this crisis because this came naturally. Most people, I have not actually heard a story of any company or organization being jerks to their employees. Now, it could be that I haven't heard it, but it doesn't mean it didn't exist. But most people we've heard some really positive things about how people are taking care of their people. And so as we're communicating around those things and noticing that you might go back into the new normal and go back into the office and somebody might be kicked into the chaos phase of this crisis when we're there. So be alert to that. And goes back to the question somebody asked earlier about the anxiety they might be feeling about the uncertainty around their jobs. Okay. And coming from the 4 ingredients for conscious communication, be listening at levels 2 and 3, hearing what they're saying, aware of their context, okay? Being courageous and transparent and wholehearted and asking the hard questions and just being honest that you don't have the answers, okay? Be curious about where they're at and the elements of trust, make sure those are in place. You'll notice a theme here that the conscious conversation, there's nothing new how we apply it in the phases of crisis if we're doing it all the time. And if we're not doing it all the time, we can up this with the tools that I shared with you today. You can increase this for your everyday communication, because if you're doing it every day, you'll be able to do it more easily in crisis. So at this time, our communication needs to focus on establishing new routines and for an integrated work life. And most of us now, we're 5 weeks in here in Vancouver. Most of us have actually kind of established some routines for integrated work life. I mean, I always worked from home, except for when I was going out to do presentations. So not a lot different for me, but I've watched my husband, and he's working from home, and how some of my clients and some of my friends are integrating the work life now. And so we're still there establishing those routines. So still coming from a place of non-judgment, because we don't know where people are at, and starting to work on new problems and short-term opportunities, and doing less well rather than more. This is such a beautiful opportunity for us as a global humanity, as individuals, and as teams and organizations to kind of look at what we're doing and shift away from that more is better model. And again, coming at it from listening at level 2 and 3, courageous conversations, curiosity, and trust. And in the new normal, and as I mentioned before, we got 1 foot in acceptance and 1 foot in the new normal right now, but we're not fully in the new normal, even though we're using that phrase, because we don't know what it's going to be yet. So we're going to be focusing here on opportunity to redesign, setting clear expectations, getting into high gear, having ideas, and innovate openly. So here's an opportunity for you to innovate openly with how your team is communicating with each other by taking back these exercises and doing it with them, okay, and pushing some of those boundaries around conversations and communication. Okay. So in summary, we looked at the 4 ingredients for conscious conversations. We gave you a formula for tough conversations. And I hope that you've seen that though we've got the 3 phases of crisis and we're kind of swinging back and forth between them, that this idea of conscious conversations applies in any time. It's not different because we're in crisis, okay? It's perhaps more important because we're in crisis, but it's not different, okay? All right. So last opportunity for you to share in the chat is what you're going to take back and share with somebody in your life, on your team, anywhere. Because the best way for us to learn something is to teach it. So an idea that you got today that you want to share with your team, or just even debrief with someone on your team, or maybe share with your spouse, so you can lock it in for yourself. If you can take a moment right now to pop that in the chat, what is that key idea for you that you're taking back today into your conversations? Yeah, what does done look like? It opens up so much opportunity for conversation. Yeah, and thinking through beforehand, because we tend to get in, like, if we're in fight or flight mode when we're entering into a conversation, it's not going to go as well. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Values conversation, super useful formula. Thank you, guys. Just want to make sure that you got some insight, and without being able to see your faces and read the room and know where the energy's at, I really need you to help me by letting me know what was valuable for you. Okay. Yeah. Writing down the facts. Darren says, communicating boundaries. Yeah. What's okay and what's not okay. when you come from that point of view, it makes it so much easier. It's not okay if you talk to me this way, right? Stick to the plan. Yes. Somebody said, I need to read Dare to Lead. Yes, you do. All of you need to read Dare to Lead. It's a fantastic book, and the program is great too. There's training programs that you can sign up for, and I can bring some of that to you. I'm Dare to Lead trained. There's different levels of training for Dare to Lead and what you're allowed to do in terms of teaching other groups, but it's great. Yes, graduating to more active listening. There is no right or wrong. This is the most important thing to come with for the values, right? Because we tend to we're so black and white, like I'm right, they're wrong. And if we come from that place that there is no right or wrong, right? The risk taker versus the security seeker, neither one of them are right or wrong. They're just different. And if we communicate that with each other, it's super, super helpful. Okay. Thanks, guys. All right. So what I want you to do is, we're going to wrap up right now. Sorry, we're about a minute over. We're going to go one more minute. Stay with us, and then we'll get you out of here. Is to schedule a 10/24/7 review. And what that looks like, I want to make sure you lock in the learning. So from your notes that you took from today, I want you to schedule 10 minutes, 24 hours from now, and then again 7 days from now to review your notes from this workshop. I don't want you to merely consume this, because I know I was a teacher and I've been to plenty of these workshops where you're like, wow, this is a great idea and I'm so going to do that. And then Monday you go back to doing things the way you always did. Okay, so you have to be really intentional. So I want you to schedule that a week from now, you're going to revisit this and ask yourself, how have I implemented any of this? How could I implement another piece of this? Okay, everybody okay with that? Like that idea? I hope so. I'm going to assume you're saying yes. Awesome. Okay, so if you're a yes to doing a review of that, the 10/24/7, please put a yes in the chat. Okay, awesome. 2 more things and I'll hand it back to Kate. Awesome. So I have some gifts for you. Because first of all, I want to acknowledge you for being here today, for taking the time to be here to learn, to up-level your leadership skills. It's so, so important, right? It's the, you are here. And I acknowledge you for your commitment to your growth, the contribution this is going to make to your relationships by way of sharpening your conscious conversation skills. And because of your dedication and growth, I want to give these gifts for you. So I have a subscription. I have a readitfor.me. So it's a readitfor.me is a program where they do book summaries, and they're awesome. And so you get a summary of Dare to Lead on there. I have it currently in my reading list. So if you go to readitfor.me/stellar, you can get a free 1-year subscription to my reading list. Okay. And because you guys, I know, are interested in learning and growing in your leadership, I have lots of different selections each month. And plus there's 5 free books from Read It For Me, as well as my 3 each month. So there's 8 summaries for you each month for flexing your leadership muscle and your communication muscle. Okay. And the other thing that I want to gift you with for being here today is a 1-hour coaching call with me. So if you feel that, if you want to go deeper with anything that we talked about today, anything that we covered, I'll open myself up to putting a 1-hour coaching call on the calendar for you. My gift to you, and if you got everything you needed today, that's great. I'm so glad. And but if you want to take advantage of this offer to have a 1-hour coaching call with me, to follow up on anything we did here, go deeper, maybe deal with a specific issue you're wanting to have some support around, a specific conversation you're wanting to plan, you can use that 1 hour with me for anything related to what we talked about today. Okay, and to take advantage of that, all you have to do is email me at debstell@gmail.com with the subject line "More Conscious Conversations," no later than May 5th. And May 5th is 1 week from now, when you're going to be doing the 7 part of your 10/24/7 review. Okay, so that'll remind you. So feel free to reach out if you would like some extra support around that. Okay, and if there are any other questions, now's the time to pop them in the chat. And if you have to go, we understand, but I do want to, if you'll stay and just listen to Kate for just 1 minute, I think she's got some housekeeping things for you. Let's be friends. Connect with me on LinkedIn at Deborah Stellingwerf. Email me at debstell@gmail.com. you can find my websites there. Anyways, thanks everybody for being here today. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate your commitment to strengthening your courage skill and your conscious conversation skills, because one person at a time is how we make cultures of conscious conversation and courageous cultures. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Kate because I think Kate has some. Oops, stop share.
I have some closing remarks. Basically, no, just to say thank you so much, Deb, for joining us today and for the wonderful insights that you've shared, both on what we're going through now in crisis mode, but also these things are so important for our personal and professional relationships moving forward. So definitely skills that we can use today and in the future. And now we've got some work to do with some tangible tips and guides to move us forward. So that's great. I also want to thank Norton Rose Fulbright, who is the WLI annual sponsor. And thanks to all of you for joining and participating in our first digital workshop. This is exciting for us to be able to offer, and we hope to follow up with more. And encourage everyone to explore upcoming events, both with ULI BC as well as ULI in general, and look into membership options if you're a guest today, because there are definitely a bazillion resources on the ULI website that will be helpful for leadership today, tomorrow, and beyond, and all sorts of other resources that are out there for members. Some of our upcoming events I'll remind you about. You may get reminders if you're a member or if you're signed up for the email list, but we have a weekly off-script Pacific West Coast happy hour, and that's every Thursday from 4 to 6. So it's a fun thing to join. If you haven't tried it already, check it out. ULI Rapid Adaptation webinar with ULI Northwest, which is sort of our Seattle, Oregon, Idaho counterparts, and that's coming up on Friday. And in May, we have what's called the ULI Canada Pulse Check, and you can find out more information about these events on the ULI BC website, which I can pop that in the chat. But you can look us up online as well. So that would be the end of our program. And again, thanks to Deb, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. There's the website in the chat if anyone's still looking.
There we go. Thanks. And someone said they want to share it with their organization. Yeah, feel free to share. And if you want some more of these resources, reach out to me as well.
Great. Okay, well, everybody have a wonderful day and a good week.
Make it a great week.